Broadly, there could be three categories in which those wrong actions could be put. You can call it circumstantial is one extreme, where the action is largely triggered by the circumstances. And then the other extreme would be intentional, or we could say calculational. That means the person made a calculated decision to do something bad. So in the Ramayana itself, if we consider the incident where Ravan abducted Sita, that was not a circumstantial decision. That is not a circumstantial wrong, rather. It's very calculational. You see, it was a conspiracy that was planned in cold blood, where he calculated, okay, I'll use Maricha for this, I'll use this for this, I'll use for this, and then I'll come in this particular garb. So it's a very calculated action. And circumstantial means that in the Ramayana itself, there's the story of Sugriva. When he gains his kingdom back, at that time, there is the rainy season starting, and 4 months of torrential rains are there. And nobody is able to do anything at that time. But the promise that he has made to Ram is that you help me gain my kingdom back and I'll help you find Sita. But even after the 4 months gets over, Sugriva doesn't seem to be doing anything. He's caught. Caught in what? He is caught in indulgence. He has become consumed by the desire to enjoy royal pleasures. And in that enjoying royal pleasures, he forgets his obligation to Ram. But once he's reminded that he's doing something wrong, so once he's reminded that he's doing something wrong, then he immediately gives up that wrong. And then afterwards, he becomes a very, very faithful, servant of Ram. Later on, when Ravan tries to tempt him by offering him a very favorable treaty, he says that I will give you wealth. You just stop fighting on Ram's behalf. And earlier we had a treaty with the previous monkey king Wali. We can continue the same treaty with you. Sugriva is not even slightly tempted. He doesn't need any time to make a decision at all. So that was an action that was circumstantial. There was a wrongdoing. He forgot his promise to Ram, and it was not a minor promise. And circumstantial. It's okay. Sorry for the recording in progress. Was the audio clear? Is what I spoke until now clear?
Yes.
Thank you. So, there is. Can you make me a post? So, discussing two extremes of wrongdoings. One is circumstantial, where in the situation a person gets tempted and the person does something wrong. And the other is so basically, if we consider a person and they have done something wrong, there's a wrongdoing that has happened. Now, the wrongdoing could be impelled by their circumstance. That's a circumstantial wrongdoing. Or that could be coming from the core of the person. That is what we call as an intentional wrongdoing. Now, intentional, you could also call it calculational. That means the person has done something calculated. So, when I was in school, there was one kid who was a bit of a bully. There's some of you notice that I need crutches for walking. So he would be a little mean, he would tease me as cripple. And then afterwards, whenever there were exams, he would come and ask me for help. And at that time, he would say, sorry, at least I was just trying some fun. I didn't mean it. It was just a joke. And I wouldn't do it. So I said, okay, maybe it is just something one-off. But then, whenever the exam would be there, it would be very nice and friendly too. And after the exam would get over, then again, he would again start mocking me, making fun of me, being basically mean to me. So then it is almost like it's like two persons. There's like in Western literature, there's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of thing. Sometimes very nice, and sometimes he was utterly mean. And fortunately, I used to identify with my intellectual side much more than my physical side. So I didn't feel very hurt by it. But it is just annoying. And I felt, why should I, which is the real person over here? Is the real person, he used to tell me that sometimes, yeah, I don't know what happens to me. I just feel like teasing, I feel like mocking, and I can't stop myself from doing it. I don't want to do it, but I just can't stop myself. So I had a lot of difficulty in figuring out what kind of person is this. So we all have also the situation that sometimes people are good and sometimes people are not so good. So which is the real person? So these are two broad categories where somebody, say for example, somebody is trying to recover from alcoholism, and then they go to a work meeting and they're very earnest about giving up alcohol, but they go to a work meeting and there are drinks over there and somebody tempts them or somebody just offers them a drink and they can't say no, and they drink and then they keep drinking and they keep drinking. What they say is first the drinker takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, and then the drink takes the drinker. That's how it degenerates. So they may have an episode of a full-blown relapse. So now can we say, okay, this is just they went into that circumstance. And that circumstance is what led it to the person doing something wrong. So I gave the example of circumstantial as Sugriva. In the circumstance, he did it and he did not do it again. And intentional calculation, what is the example? Ravan. So broadly speaking, we could say that from the action itself, it's very difficult to decide. But so nature of the wrongdoing, we'll try to, if you forget everything from this session, if you just remember this table, everything that I want to speak in this session is going to be summarized in this table. So nature, then there is response, external, and response, internal. And then lastly is this is more in terms of their response. And here we could call it as response in terms of how we should deal with that person. So if response external and response internal. So internal, there should be some regret that I did something wrong. And external, there should be some reform that I stopped doing it. Okay. So when there is a circumstantial wrong, then do you think there is a regret over there? Does the person regret what they did? Sugriva regretted, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot it. I should not have forgotten. Is there reform? Yes. So if there is regret and reform both, then basically it's forget and forgive. So we'll elaborate on this a little bit more later. But then let's go to the other extreme. Other extreme is calculation. Now the word intentional is more familiar, but it's very difficult to know what is intentional. That's why I prefer the word calculation. See, generally when something is circumstantial, it's just the circumstances come up and the person does something wrong. The person doesn't deliberately create the circumstances. The person doesn't deliberately try to cover their tracks. And calculational means they create the circumstances where they can do something wrong. And then if they are caught, they try to blame someone else. So is there regret in such a situation? There's no regret. And now, is there reform? There's absolutely no reform. If we consider in the Mahabharata, there are the Pandavas and the Kauravas. Now, if you see the Kauravas, they do wrongs. There are 4 major wrongs that the Kauravas do. Those of you know the Mahabharata, can you tell what were the wrongs that they did? Whatever you remember.
Burn down the palace.
Yes, they tried to burn the Pandavas. So normally, there's the crime of arson. Now, arson is generally burning down property. But burning people alive, that is far more horrendous. In fact, among all ways of killing someone, burning is considered one of the most brutal. Not one of the, it is the most brutal. Because what happens is when the head is cut off or poison is given, the pain is localized to one part of the body. But burning means the entire body suffers. So it's especially brutal. Was this the first wrong that the Kauravas did? What is the first one? Okay, that was after this, isn't it? Yeah. What is the first one?
Poison.
Yeah, poisoning Bhima. Now, if you consider among poisoning Bhima and burning the Pandavas, is the second one worse than the first or smaller than the first? Worse. Why worse? More people. More people and also a bigger conspiracy. Isn't it? The first was also some level of conspiracy. Duryodhan called the Pandavas for a picnic. And then he said, oh, Bhima, you like to eat? we have had some tension among us. I want to reconcile. So I made a special feast for you. I'll feed you. Now, that also cannot be called circumstantial. It's not that, we are having a meal with someone and that person goes to the washroom and that time we get a urge, maybe I should put some poison in this person's food. That also is a deadly thought to get just because we are angry with someone. But you could say that's a circumstantial thing. That's a horrible thing still. But it is a cold-blooded plan that he had separate food for Bhima. Now, after that was disrobing Draupadi. Now, was disrobing Draupadi worse than the previous ones, or not so, or less worse? Why is that?
Taking away the dignity of a woman in front of other person. Even if it's a woman or anyone, but taking away the dignity of a person is far horrendous than killing a person. That is what
it's like violating the dignity of anyone. That is a horrendous crime. That's one aspect. There's another much more important aspect, and that's true. Another reason why this is far worse. So the previous two were done at least to some extent secretly. Isn't it? This was done publicly. Isn't it? It's like, say, suppose somebody tries to molest someone. They catch someone in a dark street and there are no witnesses and they do some molestation. That's terrible. But if somebody does a similar crime in public, that means they have no fear of the law. But if somebody goes to the police station and does a crime like that, that means not only do they have no fear of the law, rather the law has fear of them. So this was the nature of the crime. That openly, not just openly, but in the royal assembly, he did that. So we see that his wrongs were becoming worse and worse. And what are the final wrong that he did?
Even after this incident, they reinvited them for the dice game and then exiled them to the forest.
Yes, okay. This is having Draupadi and then the gambling match. The gambling match had two distinct parts to it. They're all part of the same incident, broadly speaking, but yes, the gambling match itself was a big conspiracy. But there's one more incident which was, in many ways, the final straw for the Pandavas. After that, a war has to happen. Yes? Yes. Arresting Krishna when he came as a peace messenger. Now, in terms of the gravity of the wrong, it might not seem very serious. Like they try killing someone and arresting someone. But in the context, when Krishna has come as a peace messenger, at that time, not only do they first reject his peace proposal, rejected in the most disrespectful of terms. What are the disrespectful terms? He said, I will not give you enough land to even put the tip of a needle through. Now, what does this mean? That in the age of social media, this would have become a viral Insta reel. Kya dialogue hai? What it means is there are different ways in which somebody may say no. Say we have some ceremony at our home and we invite somebody and that person doesn't want to come. So they make an excuse. Now they make an excuse. We know that they're making an excuse. And they know that we know that they're making an excuse. But at least out of politeness, they're trying to make an excuse. But if they say, even if I die, my dead body will never come to your door. Then that is not just a no to the invitation. That is a kick in the face of the inviter. So this was, in terms of the gravity of the wrongdoing, it might not have been so serious. But in terms of reflecting the attitude of the person, I don't care for any reconciliation at all. It was very serious. So when the wrongdoing start becoming worse and worse, that is the time, then here there has to be some disciplining. Disciplining, which could also mean punishing. So now Discipline can come in various forms. Because while forgiving and forgetting is important. Now, of course, when you say forget, there is no forget button in our brain. We can't just forget. But forget means basically stop replaying it. So stop replaying it. Even if it comes, don't hold on to it. Let it go. So, but there are times when if somebody is a calculational wrongdoer, then forgiving is not only undesirable, it can be utterly foolish. So broadly speaking, somebody may do some wrong because of weakness. Weakness means everybody has some weakness of character. Like somebody may weakness towards a particular temptation. Somebody may weakness towards money. Somebody may weakness towards sensual desire. Somebody may weakness towards power. They may abuse that power. But as opposed to weakness, there is wickedness. Wickedness is where the person is cold-blooded, the person is calculated. So, forgiveness in the face of weakness, that is kindness. Forgiveness in the face of wickedness, that is blindness. That is not kindness at all. It is blindness, and that will be self-destructive. If some terrorist is on a shooting spree, just killing innocent people, and the police come and police have got their gun at the terrorist now, and the terrorist has run out of bullets. He says, I'm sorry, and I forgive me. And the police lowers their gun, and the terrorist sneaks out a knife and flings it and kills the police. So there are people who are cold-blooded, and forgiving them would be disastrous. So there are situations, while forgiveness is important, there is a categorical difference between forgiveness as an individual virtue. Each one of us, in our interpersonal relationships, we all can try to be more forgiving. And say, in all our relationships, we'll sometimes make mistakes, other people will make mistakes, and we all need to be forgiving each other. However, forgiveness cannot be a state policy. The state cannot state that, oh, if anybody robs, we'll forgive all of them. In California, during the pandemic, they adopted that policy. And people are so poor, people don't have means of living, so that's why they are robbing. So they had that if somebody robs anything, they go into a supermarket or whatever, in a mall, and they rob anything below $700. They will not even be registered as a crime. Now, or some policy like that here also, we are fortunate. So now what happened was, people would break into all these big shops, and they were not just stealing grocery and stuff like that. They're taking Louis Vuitton purses, and they were taking various things, and then they were selling it on eBay and other places. They're very calculatedly stealing something below $700. So the point is, forgiveness cannot be a default state policy. So Krishna, sometimes people say that, Krishna is God, Arjuna doesn't want to fight. Why does Krishna tell Arjuna to fight? Shouldn't we be peaceful? Arjuna doesn't want to fight, Krishna should also tell Arjuna not to fight. Well, Arjuna is not acting as an individual over there. Arjuna is acting as a representative of the state. And the other side, as we discussed, is repeated wrongdoers. And as a representative of the state, Arjuna has to consider his duty to his citizens. So while forgiveness is important, and all of us definitely in our day-to-day relationships, we can and should try to become more forgiving. But no virtue should be absolutized. So we cannot constantly be forgiving when somebody is a repeated wrongdoer. So now how do we know that somebody is a repeated wrongdoer? It is, are their wrongs increasing or decreasing with time? That's the basic thing to look at. If the wrongs are increasing, And secondly, what is their attitude? We talk with them. Sometimes some people say sorry, but they say sorry in such a way, I'm sorry I did that. They're actually, you can say that they are not at all sorry about it. Those words are, they say, I am sorry. And inside they say, you are such a fool. You believe that I'm saying sorry. Or other thing, I'm so clever that I can apologize in such a way that you believe it. So now we cannot look into people's hearts. But to some extent, by the way people conduct themselves, we can understand whether the regret is there or not. So now, whenever any wrong has been done, whenever there is any wrongdoing, so why does Krishna tell Arjuna that you should not forgive but you should fight? As I say, one thing is he's a representative of the state. And when there's a when somebody is a representative of the state, say if I consider as an individual virtue means what? Say I am here and the other person is here. But the other person is doing something wrong, but I may decide I can forgive. Okay. This is this forgiveness as an individual virtue. But if somebody is in an official position, somebody is a leader of a community, somebody is the monitor of a group, somebody is anyway in a position of authority, then what happens is, like they are here, the other person is here, and then there is a specific victim. Now, of course, you could say the same person might also be the victim. That's possible. But there is the victim, and then there are others. So, whenever there is a wrongdoing, there are three stakeholders. There is the victimizer, there is the victim, and then there is the society. So now the society in general. So the society, we all observe what is happening around us. Now some in the society may become future victims. Because if that person continues to do wrong, that person may, as victimize one person today, they may victimize others tomorrow. And some in the society may even become victimizers. They say that, this person did wrong and got away with it. So I can also do wrong. Isn't it? So basically, when there is a wrongdoing, there has to be justice. And justice has three aspects to it. This is becoming a little complicated now. But there are three stakeholders and there are three factors over there. So for the victim, there has to be some reparation. Reparation means that you were hurt, you were victimized, and the wrong that you went through, there has to be some tangible amends made for that. For the victim, there has to be reparation. Now, for society, there has to be regulation. Now, you could say regulation or protection. Regulation means society should learn that if we do that, it is our responsibility that other people should not get victimized. It's also our responsibility that other people should not take the wrong example and start doing wrong things. It's like justice should not just be done, but justice should be seen to be done so that other people don't become wrongdoers. And victimizer, there has to be restriction. Restriction in the sense that that person should not be able to do wrongs again. So let me make this a little clearer now. So when justice is to be done, there are three different aspects for the three stakeholders. That for the victim, there has to be reparation. For the victimizer, there has to be restriction. And for society in general, there has to be regulation. Now, Ideally speaking, from restriction, the person should go towards reformation. Reformation, that person should change their heart and they should stop doing the wrong. But even if that is not there, at the very least, they should not be put in a situation where they have the power to do the wrong again and again. That level of restriction is required. And sometimes, if some person is just not ready to reform at all, not ready to restrict their power at all, then the restriction may mean that capital punishment. That's what has to be done with Ravan, because he rejects all these proposals. That's what has to be done with Duryodhana, because he is not even ready to acknowledge the wrong that he's. So now the Gita is very clear that justice is not the same as revenge. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita that fight but have no inimical view towards anyone. Nirvairaha sarvabhuteshu. Do not consider anyone to be an enemy. That means you're not fighting because you hate them and you want to get even with them. You're fighting because you are a representative of the state. You need to establish order in the world. And that's why wrongdoers need to be curbed. So justice itself is a complicated concept, but broadly, these three aspects are there over there. There is reparation, restriction, and regulation. So reparation, for example, now in some parts of America, there is some proposals that in the past, the blacks were enslaved. And that's why we need to have some kind of reparation for that. Now, exactly to what extent reparation is required, how can it be done? All those are complicated questions. But at least some symbolism is there. That, these people are mistreated, and reparation could just mean an apology. It could be an acknowledgement. Now, when I came to America 3 months ago, and I've been traveling across North America, various places. Now, wherever I speak prominently to non-Indian audiences, one question I get repeatedly is that, is India becoming a Hindu fanatical country? That at a place where a mosque was demolished, that is the place where not only was the temple built, but the building of the temple was a national celebration. So is this not a clear evidence that India is becoming intolerant right-wing? Well, that's a very fragmented view of reality. The first point is that we can look at the location. That location has huge significance for Hindus. And it has zero significance for Muslims. Unless, of course, they consider that the place where we destroyed other religions' temples and build our own, that is significant because that shows how we are more powerful than others. Well, if that is what some religion considers significant, then it is whether that religion can survive in a multicultural ethos. That is a bigger question that arises. So there is no historical doubt. This was the Supreme Court that decided that after elaborate archaeological research, that there was a temple. And that temple was destroyed. And it's a very big place of significance. So that place of significance is being reclaimed. Now, the specifics vary, but thousands and thousands of temples were destroyed during the Muslim reign. And nobody is demanding any reparations. But at the very least, an acknowledgement. There are three stages. First, there is acknowledgement. Then there is apology. And then there is amends. In amends, there is reparation. So, if there is not even a willingness to acknowledge that something was wrong, we will not apologize, then reconciliation is very difficult. So now at the same time, if we consider the specific location, the mosque was destroyed because the mosque was built on a place that temple was destroyed. Now it is the Indian government itself that has given a separate place for the mosque to be rebuilt. It is not that mosque is permanently destroyed. And the Indian government actually had a proposal that around the same time when the temple is inaugurated, this mosque will also be built. And the Indian government was ready to give some funds also for that. They said whatever the size of the mosque that is built, we will help you build the same mosque at another place. But the Muslims said that we want to build a grand mosque, and they want now to build the mosque they want to build will be the biggest mosque in all of India. They were initially aiming for the biggest mosque in the entire world, but then they realized they will not get funds for that so much. But it is for that purpose that the mosque reconstruction has been delayed. It's going on still. So it is not that the Muslim worship itself is being stopped. Just that particular place. And around the temple in Ayodhya, even now, I went to have darshan of Ramlala over there. Around that particular temple area, right now there are 6 other mosques. And even in the height of the temple agitation, even when the Karsevaks had taken up the whole area, nobody even attempted to attack any other mosque. And those people who were running the other mosque, they said, we have never faced any threat at all. So it is not that all Muslim worship is being threatened at all. Not at all. It is just that that particular place of significance is there. And that historical wrong needs to be corrected. This does not mean that today's Muslims have to be blamed for it. Not at all. But the point is, some wrongs, see, there are some historical wrongs are just ruins. Like many cities in the Greek civilization, in the Roman civilization, they were destroyed by some invaders. But there's no Romans are existing. So when there is destruction, it can be dead ruins because nobody is eventually invested in it. Or they can be live wounds. So when the Hindu civilization is existing right now, it's a live wound. So again, this is not, I don't want to get too much into the politics of the Hindu-Muslim dynamic in India. The point I'm making is that in America here, there is an active consideration for reparation. In India, the same people who are saying we should have reparation in America, the liberals, the left liberals, they are not even asking for an acknowledgement that there was some. So leave alone apologizing or reparation. So the point is that when there is no remorse at all, there is no regret at all, at that time, a negotiated settlement becomes impossible. So there was force to be used, but still again, this is a force. I'm differentiating justice and revenge. See, revenge is disproportionate. Revenge means you hurt one person in my group, I destroy entire thousands of people. So this is not in any way revenge. It is a quest for justice. So now, coming back to in between, and this is the last part of our discussion. See, we discussed these two extremes that sometimes a person may do wrong, which is circumstantial, sometimes it may be calculational or intentional. Now, there is a third possibility where there is internal regret, but there is no external reform. You say that's not possible. There is regret, there has to be reform. Well, not necessarily. This is where we could call this third as conditional wrongdoing. Conditional means this comes not from the word condition, but from the word conditioning. In English, there is no adjective called conditioning. That's why we have to use the word conditional. So in this case, the approach has to be different. There are boundaries and bonds. Now, most of us, in our own actions, as well as in the actions of our loved ones, will find many of our wrongs fall in this conditional category. I'll explain this and then we'll conclude the talk. Now, what does conditional wrong mean? That means that inside us, there are some impressions. I talked about, I had this diagram earlier here, that when somebody does something wrong, on the external side, there is a wrongdoing that is being done. Now that can arise from circumstance or that can arise from that person itself. In the sense, this is calculational or intentional. But there's a third possibility that around the person, so if this is the soul, this is the mind of the subtle body, and here there can be conditionings. And from those conditionings, the wrongdoing comes. That means the person doesn't want to do the wrong, but the urge arises from within, and that person jananapyatmano hitam karoti bhuyo vivasha. That I know this is not good for me, but the urge comes from within me, and I'm overwhelmed, and I just can't do anything about it. So now what happens is, whenever there is this conditional wrongdoing, and now let's first look at when it comes in others, and second is when we see it in us. So our biases come into the picture. Biases, or at least we can say, the word bias is a very judgmental word, you can say, but at least our preconceptions. That means, say, if someone we like, that person yells, speaks harshly, speaks loudly, then when somebody we like, that person yells, we will say, maybe something has disturbed them. Something is going on in their life. Maybe they were disturbed by something else. Basically, we give the benefit of the doubt. But someone we dislike, that person yells, what is it? Such a mean person. Such a terrible person. No culture, no discipline. Like the small things. If somebody we like, he eats a lot of food, this person must have been hungry. If somebody we dislike eats a lot of food, glutton, must have been a pig in the previous life. Something like that. So everybody has certain conditions. Now, can we say that we should be able to fight against our conditioning and shouldn't succumb to our conditioning? Well, yes, but it may not happen immediately. Depending on how strong those conditionings are, sometimes it may take time to overcome the conditions. It may not happen immediately. So at that point, what do we do? So I will talk about the solution, but let's apply this to ourselves. See, for us also, our own relationship with ourselves can also either be healthy or unhealthy. So our relationship with ourselves. So we can go towards two unhealthy extremes. One is we have a lot of self-congratulation. Self-congratulation means, oh, I'm such a good person, I'm such a great person. In simple language, we would call this as ego. So whenever we do something wrong, if we have this self-congratulatory attitude, we will find some scapegoat. Oh, this person spoke like that. I was at one place and the temple leader over there is a good close friend of mine. And then the temple community members were talking with me and saying, this person yells at us and he gets so angry and we find it very difficult to deal with it. We want to contribute to the temple, but we just feel so alarmed and scared of being with him. So then I talked with him and he said, if only they would just listen to me, I wouldn't have to yell at them. Well, from his perspective, he seemed to be completely reasonable. But actually, in one sense, it's only when people don't listen to us does our self-discipline and our culture come. It's like those who are not humble with us, are the people who show us, who give us an opportunity to be humble. Isn't it? If somebody is very polite with us, it's very easy to be polite with them. Now, of course, sometimes strong speech may be required for correcting someone. But to justify, that person spoke like that, that's why I spoke like this. That is not a very healthy attitude. But the other extreme, another negative could be self-condemnation. Self-condemnation or self-loathing. Self-loathing. A lot of people suffer from this nowadays. Where when something goes wrong, we just beat ourselves up. So, I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, I'll never change. I'm a loser. So this is also pathological. And this can crush our own spirits. So in general, basically again if we like ourselves too much, then we will never take responsibility for anything. But if we dislike ourselves too much, then we will take the whole blame for everything when our role might only be partial. Yeah. So what happens is we need a healthy relationship with ourselves. So healthy relationship means that we need to be much more objective in evaluating the situation. Okay, when I did something wrong, so if somebody had been very short-tempered, and say in the past, when somebody would get angry, they would slap and punch someone. And now they raise their voice. Now from you could say from an absolute perspective, and raising the voice might be unhealthy. But from their particular perspective, that they have come to the level where they are not raising their fists and punching anyone. That itself is a success. They're only raising their voice. So, how can we be objective? We need to look at the context. Rather than comparing ourselves with some absolute standard, we need to compare ourselves with where we were in the past. So, now I'll explain this a little bit. That say if we are here, our present, and this is our aspiration, our goal. Now we could try to go from where we are in one large leap till here. And the result may well be that we go half the way and we go further down. We try to do something and we become so discouraged that we just quit completely. So in such a situation, we may have to create incremental steps for ourselves to get. Okay, I did get angry, but in the past, when I would get angry, I would go on a tirade for 1 hour. Here, I stopped after 10 minutes. That's not something to be proud of, but that's still something to appreciate. Yeah, I am on the path to enlightenment. This is where context is important. And if we don't consider the context, we can end up being too hard with ourselves. So I said when the wrongs arise from conditionings. In the first session, I talked about we use conditioning as distance and diligence. That same principle, which I'll link with here, that when conditional wrongdoing is there, each one of us has to create boundaries. So what are the boundaries that can help me stick to good behavior? So if somebody is a recovering alcoholic and their house is right next to a bar, then what is going to happen? Then there will be no bar for them to go to the bar. So everybody can have some moments of weakness. If they're serious, the boundary they create is a physical one. Like there are alcoholics, there are shopaholics. Shop till you drop. Now, if that's like that, then maybe don't decide I won't do any online shopping at all. I'll only go and when I go do physical shopping, or when I do physical shopping, I'll only take this much money with me. I'll not take any big credit cards. We have to decide what boundaries we need. So, say if somebody has a tendency to eat too much food, then maybe they should not be in charge of Mahaprasad. So each of us, we need to find out what boundaries we need. The scripture gives us some boundaries also. But so, for example, the idea of avoiding meat eating, avoiding unrestrained sexual activity, avoiding gambling, avoiding intoxication. These are boundaries, because in the universe, in boundaries, there could be broad universal boundaries which are meant for protection, and there could be individual boundaries. So each one of us has to decide, what boundaries do I need? So if I tend to spend so much time on social media, then maybe get some app which at least monitors how much time I'm spending on social media. Maybe which turns off those apps. So in the Bhagavatam, we said that sometimes a thorn has gone into our leg, then we need to use another thorn to take out that thorn. So if technology is creating distractions, then we may need to use technology itself to try to curtail the distraction. Maybe we cannot, most of us cannot live in a world where there will be no technology for us. So boundaries are important, and then so boundaries are what will create a distance. So distance from the circumstances that will trigger us. This is not a final solution, but this is a vital first step. Just like going away from a bar is not going to stop a alcoholic from coming to alcohol. They can just travel 100 miles to drink if they want. But at least when the urge comes, if there's a distance, they will not succumb immediately. And then the other is bonds. Bonds are what lead to diligence. Bonds means that rather than focusing on the wrong behavior that I will give up, we focus on the right behavior that we want to take up. Rather than saying, I will not get angry with anyone. Now, a not resolution is very difficult to keep up. And the problem with the not resolution is that there is no possibility of concluding conclusive success. Like I may decide I'll not get angry. I may not get angry for 1 month, and after that I get angry and I feel, what is the use? No, I can never get angry. So rather than deciding, bonds means rather than what I won't do, focus on what I will do. What is the healthy behavior that I take up? So one, I'll talk about two quick things in this. Power has gone in this. There is on my table downstairs, there is a white thing which is a portable charger. You get that? I think we can connect that to the screen. So I was talking about bonds. One way to develop bonds is, rather than instead of saying no, we want to say yes. So one way to do that is, generally speaking, it's very difficult to control our emotions when they are rising within us. But what we can do is change our questions. Change our questions means, rather than saying, I will not get angry, rather than saying that, how would I like to behave in this situation? So now we say that's a very difficult thing to say. Okay, we could change that as in, what is it that is really making me so angry? So what happens is, a question forces us out of answers. So like right now you are hearing a class, and suddenly if I ask you a question, then what happens is, okay, I was hearing a question, it forces me to think. So try to create some questions for yourself. What am I really worked up about? What is it that is agitating me so much? So if you feel a urge to watch TV or eat food or engage in some self-indulgent activity, okay, what am I really looking for? We find that actually I'm just feeling bored, I need some stimulation. Maybe we can get some healthier stimulation. Yeah. Let's see. Put this in. Put this. Okay, so try to change the questions that we ask ourselves. So rather than saying what we will not do, we try to ask a question which helps us to become what we want to become. And lastly, the most important bond is our bond with the divine. The more we connect with Krishna, the more we connect with the Lord, the more that becomes like an anchor for us. The conditionings from within or the circumstances, the conditions from without, both of them can create storms. And the storms come, it's very difficult to fight against the waves. But if you have an anchor to hold on to, then that anchor can help us stay fixed even if the waves are hitting us. So in the Ramayana, when Bharat comes back and performs the last rites of Dashrath, then after that, now he's going to become the next king. He has to at least temporarily take up the throne. He's talking with some courtiers, and Shatrugna is with him, but Shatrugna starts walking ahead, and Shatrugna passes by Kaikeyi's palace. When he's passing by Kaikeyi's palace, he sees Manthara over there. And when he sees Manthara, he says that he sees Manthara is bedecked in, she's wearing silken clothes, she's wearing costly jewels, and she's bedecked in a very opulent dress. And seeing this, Lakshman just loses it. It's generally if there's a funeral happening and somebody dresses in clothes like they're going for a party, that itself will incense us. And if we know that very person has caused all the trouble, we will be more infuriating. So Bharat, Shatrugna sees that and charges towards Kaikeyi. When Manthara, and when Manthara sees that, she screams and tries to run away. But Shatrugna catches her and starts shaking her violently. He says, "You are the cause of the darkness that has spread across our entire dynasty. You are the cause of all the tears that everybody is shedding. You are the cancer that has destroyed all happiness in our kingdom." Now, hearing her screaming, Kaikeyi comes out. And Kaikeyi tells Shatrugna, "Stop, Shatrugna!" Shatrugna pays not the least attention to her. And Bharat, meanwhile, is walking back in that same direction, and Kaikeyi sees Bharat and says, "Bharat, tell Shatrugna to stop." Bharat doesn't even look at Kaikeyi. And Bharat, in a very cold but calm voice, says to Shatrugna, "Shatrugna, what you are doing right now to Manthara, I have felt the urge to do the same thing 100 times. But," he said, "one thing has stopped me each time." He says, "We want to go to the forest to get Ram to come back. And if Ram hears that we have hurt Manthara or Kaikeyi in any way, he will be displeased with us. And he will not be agreeable to us. So, for Ram's sake, let her go." And immediately Shatrugna lets Manthara go. So the point here is that we could say in many ways, Shatrugna's anger towards Kaikeyi was justified, Manthara was justified. But he focused not only on that relationship, he focused on his relationship with Ram. Like that bhakti, that bond with the divine, when we have that, then our behavior doesn't become just a function of the other person's value. Our behavior is governed by some higher principles. And that's how we can move ahead in our lives. And each one of us can actually move towards a better place. So I'll summarize what we discussed today. Let me see if my phone is there. I can make something coming on. So anyway, I guess I will summarize orally. We discussed three main points today. I discussed about how so we discussed today about three kinds of wrongdoings. Which were the three kinds of wrongdoings? Anyone remember? Circumstantial, conditional, and intentional or calculational. So circumstantial wrongdoings, there is regret and reform. So it's best to forgive and forget. If the circumstances don't repeat, then the person now will do wrong. If it's intentional or calculational, then there is no regret and there is no reform. At that time, disciplining is required. So we elaborated on that. That second point was about. Has something come? Okay. So in that we discussed when forgiveness is good as an individual virtue, not as a state policy. And because once it's state policy, there are multiple stakeholders. So disciplining or even punishing, that is for justice, it is not for revenge. Revenge is disproportionate. Justice is proportionate. And justice has three purposes: reparation for the victim, then restriction for the victimizer. At there is restriction, best is if there's reformation. And then there is regulation for society. Regulation, the society doesn't take the wrong example to become victimizer. The society also doesn't become victims. So, with respect to people who are intentional wrongdoers, forgiveness in the face of weakness is kindness. But forgiveness in the face of wickedness is blindness. That is unhealthy. And then lastly, we discussed the intermediate, the conditional wrongdoing. So where a person regrets the wrong that they have done, but they're not able to reform because the conditionings keep coming. So when if we don't like such a person, we'll deem them as intentional wrongdoers. And if we like them, we'll say it's a circumstantial. And the same we will start doing with ourselves also. So rather than that, we try to be more objective. And being objective means basically focusing on, rather than what is the nature of the wrongdoing, is what is the solution for the wrongdoing. Focus on that. That means, create boundaries. There can be universal boundaries and there can be specific boundaries for individuals to ensure that they don't relapse. And more important than boundaries are the bonds. That not what is the behavior that I want to give up, but what is the behavior I want to take. And one way to shift our focus is to change the questions that we ask ourselves. And lastly, we focus on developing the divine bond with the Lord. And that will give us the strength. That will become the anchor when the storms from either internal conditionings or external conditions come up and they try to sweep us away in unhealthy actions. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So sometimes we see that some people are inherently wrong and wicked at their core. And some of these examples can be seen in a very young age. For example, I have read some incidents of kids drowning animals and killing animals, and later on they become psychopaths. So is there an explanation for why that happens? Is it because of prarabdha karma that they carry? Or is it entirely conditional? Is there any
conditional means it's coming from their past, conditional from past life. Some people could be having cruel in their past lives, and then they just continue that cruel nature in this life. Now, can that be changed by the upbringing that they have? To some extent, it can. But sometimes, if the upbringing is not expert enough, if the upbringing is not competent enough, then the past conditionings might just be too strong. So that's why, while parenting is a very huge responsibility, it's also important that parents not be held inordinately responsible for their children's behavior. While parenting is, taking responsibility is there, but even in parenting, there has to be some level of detachment. So it's like generally when the children are small, the parents have to take a strong responsibility and try to set boundaries for children. And in whatever be the past conditionings, to a significant extent, children are impressionable in their childhood. See, children want to please their elders because when they are very small, their whole sense of self and self-worth comes from their elders. So if a child makes a mess of their room and the parents say, okay, now you clean this up. Now, what does clean this up? I don't understand. They say, okay, you take this and keep this here. Take this and keep this here. And then the parents say, okay, you keep this here. And the child goes and keeps it there and looks at the mother. And the mother smiles. Good. Child feels good. Okay. Child picks up and puts another thing. So the child throws something. And the mother frowns. Mother becomes very stern. The father becomes very stern. Hmm? So what happens is that immediately, then the child, okay, I should not be doing this. I was recently on this Mother's Day, there was this big meme on TikTok where the kids are telling their mother, shut up, mom. It is basically a prank where the kids are telling that, and how do the father respond? So there are hundreds of memes like that where the father gets so angry. That is not the way you talk with your mother. And the kid might, and then the father gets so angry. How dare you talk with your mother like that? And then the mother and the kid start laughing. It's just a prank. Not to see how to do that. But the point is that home, an important part of responsibility is setting boundaries. That's not a pleasant part of parenting, but it's an essential part of parenting. So if the parents do set boundaries, and it's not just about forcing the kid to say not do things, but also explaining, where the kid also learns that these are the things which will displease my parents, these are the things which will please my parents. That it is possible that what a person might have got as their nature from the previous life can be overcome by nurture from this life. But sometimes, unless the person wants to change, especially when they become teenagers and adults, if they themselves don't want to change, then it's very difficult to help them. Okay, thank you. Behind there's a question, maybe.
So how could you explain when the state creates a precedent of goodness and acts evil or wicked in order to preserve this idea of goodness by using scapegoats of certain classes of citizens?
Yeah, that's a sad situation where the state is also made of human beings. And sometimes politicians can become very convenient whipping boys for everyone. All these politicians are terrible people. But it's possible, but it's also important to consider that if you or I, if we were subjected to this, we are exposed to the same level of power that the politicians have, or we were subject to the same level of pressure that they have, we might also become like this. So, one of the defining insights of, say, the American Declaration, which is also a cardinal principle mentioned in the Vedic literature, is that no class of people should be considered above corruption. And no class of people should be considered uniquely vulnerable to corruption. And so, although the Brahmanas, for example, are considered to be the highest, but the Puranas themselves are filled with many stories of the Brahmanas abusing their power. And these, why are they solved? Because they have power and they abuse their power. So those are cautionary tales. So the point is that anybody can abuse their power. And that's why there has to be some check and balance system. So the Brahmanas abuse their power, the Kshatriyas have to take responsibility. Kshatriyas abuse their power, the Brahmanas take responsibility. If both of them join corruption and the Lord himself decides as avatar. So those are exceptional situations. But in general, in any form of governance, there has to be a system of check and balance. So what that check and balance will be and how it will be specifically implemented, that is the challenge. But in general, whenever a person resorts to power to get their way, when persuasion could have helped them to get that way. Like say, a person has a good idea or a better idea than someone else, and they want someone to cooperate with them. If at that time they can make their case and they can persuade the other person. But when persuasion can work, if at that time they use power, that is a good predictor that this person is likely to abuse power in the future. So that means, because see, generally in a healthy society, we don't just want to get things done. We want to get things done and get people to come together and get along with us. Both are important. Sometimes getting things is more important than getting people to come together. And sometimes getting people to come together is more important than getting things done. Like you can say in an office environment, getting things done is more important. Now, if people don't get along with the leader's vision, they can always be fired. But if you bring that same vision to our home, in a home, getting things done is important. But getting the family to be together is even more important. And sometimes, some things are done a little slower, that should be okay. So that balancing, when I have things to do and I have to get people to go along, that has to be thoughtfully done. Am I addressing your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, this may be a related question. How do you, there's a saying, people say you have to pick your battle, but is there a criteria that you would recommend to go out? I mean, it's not revenge, but when you see justice is not served, when you see injustice, do you go after everything, or do you selectively do some things based on some criteria?
Guna and karma. The Gita talks about the words guna and karma. Is this visible now? Okay. Connected? No. Let's try to connect here. So guna means you can say it's our disposition, and karma is our position. So when we choose our battles, nobody can fight all the battles in the world. There are thousands of things that are wrong in the outer world, in our immediate vicinity, and inside us also. If we just sit down for 5 minutes, probably each one of us can make a list of 25 things that are wrong with us or that need work on us. But if we start fighting 25 battles right away, we'll end up giving up all the battles. So we all have to choose our battles. So basically our position means that if somebody has taken a position of responsibility, then it's important for them to act according to that position of responsibility. If somebody is the police and they say, I don't like to deal with lawbreakers and rioters. They're doing something, let them do it. Well, then don't beat the police. Now, of course, police office uniform. Police can abuse their power also. That's a different thing. But the point is, if one has a particular position, And if that brings certain responsibilities with them, they have to take care of those responsibilities. So we may want to take care of we may want to do benevolent projects for the world. But if our child is being bullied in school, then it is our business to know that. We should be spending time with our children so that children feel confident and our parents will address these things. They can feel confident about speaking those things. So if we have a particular position, then certain battles have to be fought by virtue of that position itself. And secondly, each person has their disposition. So in the Gita, for example, in the chapter 18, the text 41st verse and 42nd verse. So in the 41st verse, Krishna states that he's talking about the qualities of Brahmanas. And Brahmanas is a ukshama, tolerance, forgiveness. But on the other hand, Kshatriya says yuddhe chapya palayana, that not running away from a confrontation. So it's almost like for a Brahmana, seeking reconciliation, seeking forgiveness, seeking a closure. Whereas for a Kshatriya, it is not fleeing from confrontation. So there are two opposite virtues for two different dispositions. So if somebody has Kshatriya nature, each one of us has to make a calculation that if I choose this fight, then it is going to involve certain amount of complexity. And sometimes it may be that, afterwards I start thinking, why did I get involved in this? It's too agitating, too troubling. I had a peaceful life. And then if that's why we feel that the cost of the agitation, the conflict is too much, then maybe this battle is not that important for me. But for somebody else, staying silent will cause regret, will cause agitation. No, how can I live with myself if I see this happening and I just let it happen? Then if that is the case, that is our disposition, that is how much we are invested in that particular issue, then we have to stand up and fight. So each one of us has to choose our battles, really based on our inner disposition and our outer position. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So we were discussing how justice is different from revenge. But do you feel that sometimes justice is the stepping stone to revenge? I mean, if something is not catered to you how it is supposed to be, then is the time when you get into the mood of revenge.
I wouldn't say justice is a stepping stone. It is more that revenge is the alternative to justice. Like what they say that, like when two people are having a conflict, and when the talking stops between them, when they stop talking with each other, that could be because both of them have agreed to live and let live, or it could be because both sides decide now we'll start fighting. So when the talking stops, then it's like the shedding of blood may begin soon. So basically, the idea is that justice is one lane, and if justice is blocked, then people take the law in their own hands, and that's where it goes towards revenge. So in movies, for example, there are these tales of people taking the law in their own hands, and there is vendetta and vengeance, and there are these people who decide, I have a hit list or a kill list, this person after this person, this person. Now in movies it may seem quite fanciful and entertaining, but in real life it would be very dangerous. So what do? In life, sometimes we seek justice, sometimes we just accept what just is. That sometimes it may just be not in our power. So again, it will depend on disposition. And some people may say that, okay, I can't do much about this. So in such situations, sometimes thinking about past life karma and understanding that there is a destiny which plays a role. That's helpful. So, when I got polio when I was 1, so basically I was in a small village, in a small town in India. and I was given the polio vaccine. But the doctor who gave the vaccine messed things up. Basically, he had kept the vaccine in a fridge, and the power supply went out because it's a remote village and the power went up and down. So the dosage of the germ in the vaccine increased disproportionately. So the vaccine basically ended up giving me disease. So when that happened, at that time, I was very small. I was just one. I don't remember all this. But I had a maternal uncle in America. And his first response was, sue the doctors. Sue the doctor. So my father is a very pacifist kind of person. He said that, what is the use? Now the polio is already there, and the Indian legal system is probably will die before the case comes up before the court also. So he just said, let go. But then I have a friend in Florida who had a daughter, and during her pregnancy, during his wife's pregnancy, basically the hospital messed things up. And she was rushed into the ICU and ICU and everything. When she was born, the daughter was born. She had cerebral palsy and a host of other diseases. So he's my godbrother. Godbrother means that we have the same guru. So he asked his guru, or our guru, should I see this as karma and just accept it, or should I sue the hospital? Because it was a clear case of malpractice, or at least not malpractice, at least mistake on the way of the hospital. So our Guru Maharaj said that what has happened can't be changed, but she's going to require lifelong care. And if you can get some support for that, and see that as a practical resource for helping you do your duty towards your doctor for the rest of your life. So then he sued the court and sued the hospital. And because the hospital was very clearly culpable, so they settled out of the court. So when I talk about this with my spiritual master, he said, then I asked him, did my father not do the right thing at that time? He says, there is no absolute right or wrong in these situations. We have to consider time, place, circumstance, and decide. So sometimes we seek justice, and sometimes we accept what justice. Yes, please.
I wanted to ask about intention. When you were talking about Lord Rama, when he was a teenager and the demons came in a woman's form to ruin the sacrifices, and he felt he couldn't harm a woman. He saw the demon as a woman, but his teacher said, no, your duty is to protect. And the demon's intention was very negative. So that turned things around. And then when you were talking about Sita in the ring of fire and Ravana came in the form of a sage, she had the attitude of service, but Ravana's intention was very negative. Yeah. So that turned things around. So what my question is these ideas that we have about appropriate and proper ethics and behavior, when we evaluate the intention of what's coming toward us, is that sort of the linchpin to start thinking, is this historical way that I deal with things correct? Or is that like the clue to say, maybe I should be evaluating this differently?
Is this historical way of evaluating correct means? Are you saying that? Are you talking about, is that the way I should be applied in my life right now? Or is the evaluation that they did was correct?
There's certain customarily you would be polite, then someone's disrespectful to you. Maybe they intend to hurt you. Is that the point that you say, well, okay, maybe I won't be polite in this situation because their intention is that. It's not just that they got upset.
See, it's like there are many virtues. And if we consider we have a purpose in life, the purpose is our dharma. Dharma is basically the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do. Ultimately, dharma concludes in prema, is love for God and love for everyone, relationship with God. And all our virtues are meant to help us. whether it's humility, whether it's tolerance, whether it's compassion, whether it's forgiveness. So all these are meant to aid us in this. So if any of these virtues start impeding us, then we have to keep our purpose above our virtues. I'll explain what I mean by this. In the Mahabharata, it's described that Yudhishthir was told by Vyasadeva after he performed the Rajasuya Yajna, which is a big sacrifice which had him enthroned, celebrated as the monarch of the world. So Vyasadeva had performed the sacrifice. I seek your blessing so that I can rule virtuously and peacefully and prosperously. And Vyasadeva became grim and he said that, okay, I foresee a big war in the future. And after that war, you will have a reign of peace and prosperity. So Yudhishthira became contemplative at that time. And he thought, I don't want a war to happen. So he started thinking, what causes war? He did his own reasoning. Says war is caused by unresolved conflicts. Unresolved conflicts are unresolved because those who can resolve the conflict, there is disrespect for authority. So if there is one authority who says, okay, this is how we want to resolve the conflict. When people don't respect that authority, the conflict is unresolved. So therefore, he said, the solution should be respect. So if I can have respect, then this whole chain can be broken. Then authority were for him the elders. So he decided, I'll always respect my elders and obey my elders. Now this was a normal virtue also, but he made a conscious resolve for that. But then Dhritarashtra was the elder involved, and he asked Yudhishthira to come for a gambling match. Yudhishthira was extremely reluctant. And as the gambling spiraled downward and downward, Dhritarashtra could have at any moment have stopped. Said, enough is enough. But Dhritarashtra did not. In fact, when Draupadi was put on stake, he was again and again asking, has Panchali been won? Has Panchali been won? Till then, he had worn a mask of neutrality. Although he was partial towards his son, at least externally he was wearing the mask of neutrality. But that mask fell off at that time. So he realized that his elder in this case was not his ambition. And simply obeying his elders would get him into trouble. So after the 13 years of that exile was over, when he sent a message that now that we have finished the term of exile, please give us our half of the kingdom back. The Dhritarashtra sent him a message, oh, my best wishes to you, oh child. Everything in this world is temporary. Even somebody who becomes a king ultimately has to renounce the world and go to the forest. You're so fortunate, you're already in the forest. Stay on in the forest. Why fight a war to gain a kingdom that you will have to renounce in the future? Live peacefully, my blessings are with you. You don't fight against your own family for a temporary kingdom. So now this was a very self-serving kind of reasoning. So Yudhishthira did not fall for the rules. Yudhishthira did not think, oh, my elders are saying that, I'll accept it. So he said that we are still young, we have responsibility to our family, we have responsibility to our children, to our ancestors to continue our dynasty. So the Pandavas decided that they had grown up in hardship in the forest. That they had been born in the forest and they had grown up in the hardship. So although they were with Draupadi for 14 years, they decided that we will have. So they decided that we want to have our children to also have the opportunity to be virtuous Kshatriyas and leaders. So you need to obey at that time. So what does that mean? That means he understood his duty to his citizens was higher than his deference to his elders at that particular time. So the point I'm making is his virtues are important, but no virtue should be absolutized. So ultimately, what is our duty? What's our responsibility? And how is a particular virtue aiding us in our responsibility? That is important. when Prabhupada wanted to start doing outreach. So he wanted to take sannyas. And he wrote to one of his godbrothers, senior godbrothers. Most of his godbrothers were leaders, were senior to him at that time. And he said, the senior godbrother said, sannyas cannot be given so cheap. He said, you have to come to our ashram, stay in the ashram, follow the disciplines of the ashram. We'll observe you. And after a few years, when we can see that you have the discipline, then we'll give you sannyas. Now, Prabhupada was elderly, he didn't have the time for all this. So he wrote to another godbrother. He didn't think, oh, this godbrother is saying we don't take sannyas, that means this is what Krishna wants. He had a purpose. He respected that godbrother, but respect doesn't mean necessarily obedience in that particular context. He wrote to another godbrother and he immediately said, yes, you should immediately take sannyas. So, that way. Did I address your question?
You did very, very nice.
Thank you. Any last question before we stop? So, okay, I'll quick. Okay, yes.
So sometimes as adults, we have duties towards our elders and as well as duties towards our children. So what is higher? Sometimes we see that if we listen, I mean, we should be listening to our elders, what they're saying, we should be respectful and all. But then we see we are not at peace with it. And that not being peace with it is causing problems in our own dependents, which are our children. So what should be prioritized? Like respectfully denying their opinions and just continuing with our like parently duties nicely, being peace with our own thoughts, or be tolerant and I don't know, what is the priority?
My priority is not getting into trouble. Not really. Okay, I'd say. See, real life is complex. And there are no simple or straightforward answers. In fact, Krishna trains Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita to take responsibility for his decisions. That's why Krishna doesn't give a ready-made answer to Arjuna what he should do. Krishna goes through the whole process of philosophical reasoning by which Arjuna will himself be convinced about what he wants, what he should be doing. So, and later on in the Bhagavatam is described that Ashwatthama is to be punished. At that time, Krishna is there with Arjuna, but Krishna does not give any decision to Arjuna. It is Arjuna, you take the decision. And then Arjuna internalizes the principles of the Gita and takes a decision. And Krishna is pleased. So my understanding is the right decision is not necessarily just one line. If you don't take that, it's wrong. The right decision is often an expressway. And in that expressway, there can be different lanes. So in such situations, whether we prioritize our children or we prioritize our parents, this is something which has to be individually decided. You could bring in one more dynamic over here. Sometimes should we listen to our parents or should we listen to our spouse? We do one thing to please our parents, another thing to required for pleasing our spouse. What do we do? So I think there's no black and white answer over here. Each person has to consider their context and see what helps them move forward the most. So we all grow with different values. And what happened? It's also got system. Anyway, so broadly, you can say there are three value systems in the world. You could say there is the right in the political divide, right and left, the conservative value system, where the hierarchies are considered very important. Then there is the left value system, where equality is considered most important. And then in between, not necessarily between, the third value system is the liberal value system, where autonomy is considered very important. So hierarchy, equality, autonomy. So in conservative societies, like this is the hierarchy and this is how things have been done. This is how things have worked in the past. This is how we should be doing things. That is what is valued. And that's fair enough. That has worked, that way has worked in many places. So hierarchy can preserve order, but it can also lead to suppression of talent. It can lead to exploitation. It can lead to suffocation of. Now the left value system is where equality is sought. Now equality may give opportunity for everyone for talent to be expressed. But equality, the problem is equality can lead to incompetence. Because not talent itself is not equally distributed. Competence is not equally distributed. You can't really have equality between parents and children. Isn't it? At least when the children are small, the parents have to be the authority figure. Otherwise, the children will not grow properly. So equality is not the most important. Equality cannot make absolutize that as a value. So then autonomy. Most of America was founded not so much on equality as on autonomy. So autonomy means I want my space to do what I want to do. So autonomy on the positive side, it leads to a lot of space for creativity. When people are individual, they can be creative. Autonomy is not the same as equality. Not that I want the same rights as somebody else has. I want my space to do what I want to do. But too much autonomy can lead to chaos. It's like if every player in a cricket team starts playing the way they want to play, we won't have a team, we'll just have a chaos. So these three things, HEA, hierarchy, equality, autonomy, they are ultimately unified by the L of love. That's how we can heal. If any of these value systems is highlighted too much, if too much hierarchy, too much equality, too much autonomy, it lead to problems. But when there is a foundation of love, then, okay, we understand, for this person, hierarchy is very important. So maybe in this relationship, I will accept the hierarchy. But we understand for this person, autonomy is very important. Let them have this much space. So I think if there is love, then there can be candid discussion. And ultimately, if there is love for the Lord, then that gives everyone an internal security and internal stability. So in a spiritual moment like ours also, there are conservative people, there are liberal people, there are left-oriented people. And Krishna's movement is big enough to include all of them. Everybody is centered on Krishna. So think that if we can focus on the principle of love, and love means we should be able to share our heart with the other person hears our heart. And sometimes they may still insist on hierarchy. But that's okay. If there's loving exchange, then one particular value can be prioritized in that particular situation. So that's my understanding, that we prioritize the bond of love in that relationship, and then other things will fall in their place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shri Ramachandra Bhagwan ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Gaura. So I pray that the wisdom of the Ramayana enrich all of you and empower you to have deeper, better relationship with each other and with the Lord. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. So much of what I spoke today is from my latest book on living the Ramayana. If any of you were not here yesterday or did not get a copy, we have those books available. It's a small book. And then the calendar with 366 quotes inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are available in case any of you would like to have them. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, dear viewers. What an amazing 3 days seminar we had by His Grace Chaitanya Prabhu. And I know many of you got and describe your spiritual journey of Himashwaran. If not, at least somebody has got inspired, and some people they would like to pursue more, pursue further, and dive deep into this one. Let's express our gratitude to His Grace Chaitanya Prabhu for coming, especially Boston, for
for us, as I told you, that he generally goes to one city only for a couple of days or maybe 2 or 3 days. But he has been very generous enough to give us more than a week. So let's give a big round of applause. Please follow him as he's a voracious reader. Avid, you can see that he's a writer also, he's an author. He has written almost maybe 20 books, close to 20 books he has written. Yeah. And he's a thinker, he's a philosopher, and he's a part of our upper intellectual body. It's called intellectual body, it's called a Shastric, governing body, so he's part of that. No wonder why, as you are, and I don't have by looking at anything what he analyzes in a completely different way. And it's like diving deep into that. So please listen to his classes if you're interested. And he has a host of classes which are there. He has a Gita, Daily Gita, and also GitaDaily.com, and also he has a spiritual scientist. He's very famous. Yeah. Yeah, that also there are many monks. Now he's in a he has grown up. You have seen probably in Pune. Yeah. So when he was a monk, and now Prabhuji is in many places. He has been in the monk's podcast also there, and he has his own podcast, and also he has been part of other podcasts also. So you can listen to all that. You can just Google. You can see that Chaitanya Prabhu, and you can see many of his sessions and classes. And of course, and today is his last day, if you have have desire to talk to him, please feel free to meet him here. This is the last chance for you. Of course, he'll come back next year. I don't know why to wait next year. Just meet him and see. He has books also, so you can take some books, and then he can guide you if you're interested. If you want to stay in touch with him, or any other questions you might have in your spiritual journey, he can answer them. Thank you once again. On behalf of ISKCON Boston, we express our gratitude to all the people who have come. For stayed 3 days. It's difficult to have 3 straight days to all the people, and we have a very considerable number for all 3 days. Thank you once again. We appreciate that for your attendance. We would like to continue this this tempo. We don't want to lose this interest or this temperament. We want to continue this further. So we are planning to do the Gita sessions from tomorrow onwards. Next, either tomorrow onwards, or maybe we can have Monday onwards. So there's 3 to 5 days which we are planning to do. So what do you think? And of course, we'll keep it in the evening. How many of you would like to come for the straight, say 4 days or 5 days for the next one, if you want to do the Gita sessions? And what would be the better one? Should we do a straight 5 days, or should we do it like once in a week? Once in a week. So some are there. Okay, yeah. Okay, how many of you want to do once in a week? Okay. And how many of you would like to have straight 5 days or 3 days? Okay, that's good. Because when we have time at our disposal, utilize it now. Because as you know, your time itself, when you evaluate your own situation, you know that as your classes begins, you get entangled into so many things. It becomes difficult. So now, since you have time, why don't you use it? Later on, it becomes very difficult. Right now, whatever we have, just use it. Use that. So fine. So we noted. So I think we can have both. What it seems that. So whatever works for some people, we'll do that, and whatever works for others, we'll also do that. We have many months here. They're saints, so you'll also many years from them, you'll also understand that. So yes, this is what we do here. So as just like we'll have universities, so this temple is a place where we teach this philosophy. This amazing wisdom, which otherwise is very difficult to find. Right? So even if you imagine the amount of the knowledge what she has shared, it's very rare. It's very difficult. Even if you shared maybe perhaps $1 million, I would say that you will find it's timeless, and also it's priceless. Yes. But the only problem is that we don't value it. Okay. So let's at least honor those people who would like to dive more deeper into this. We're going to continue some sessions here. So see us. So we're going to have. So please meet us while we honor the food. So after this we're going to honor the food. So you can make a line, go from this door, take a plate of food, and then come back again here. sit here. And then we will come by and we can talk to you. And you can also let us, if you don't happen to come to you, then please meet us. We have all of the people here, and you can talk to them. And then spiritual interest, and then we can take down your names and we'll send you the request, the invitation for the next course. Okay, thank you once again. So one announcement as here, we have a regular sessions which goes on every Sunday as well. Every Sunday here at Saturday, Sunday around 1 p.m. And there are various other sessions also. If you are not, those who are interested, we have online sessions as well. So please see us. We can line up or put you in one of those sessions. Sundays and Wednesdays we have regular open houses here. So this Sunday we have open house, and Wednesdays also we have open houses. So we have two open houses. From 6 o'clock, 5 to 6 on Sundays is a Gita session, and 6 to 6:30 is worship, standing worship, and then followed by that we have the announcements and the food, the prasadam itself, and then we again have 8:30 darshan. So that's the last worship which happens. And Wednesday we have 6 to 6:30 is a worship, standing worship, and then followed by that we have a Gita session which goes all the way up to 8 o'clock. It's a kind of a discussion. It's a beautiful and amazing setting. If anybody has come, you would experience that. It's a beautiful one. Please join us on Wednesdays if you want to. And then it's 8 to 8 o'clock. We have a last night. So that's what is the Wednesdays and Sundays. And Saturdays we have a Saturday night kirtan. It's only pure, just blissful musical meditation. If anybody is interested, please do join us. It's an amazing environment. You will love it. And of course, all these sessions followed by the prasadam. Okay, wonderful thing. So you don't have to worry. Your belly is full. Okay, heart is free. Your mind is completely peaceful. That's what happens when you come to here at the temple. Yes, and then the last but the most important part is that we are having the biggest festival of the year, open air festival. That's on Saturday, June 22nd. Is the Rath Yatra festival. Please do join us. As I told you last time, like